Right, hello everyone, and welcome back to Era Military Collectibles. So, I'm still up with Danny in Hereford, and just a quick picture. See the picture here at the back? The SAS Who Dares to Win, obviously that sign. That is a direct copy, reproduction of a sign from the SAS, from documentary archive photos of World War II. So I just thought that was a little interesting little picture that we're going to cover. But the main thing we're going to cover in this picture is we're covering every service rifle of the British Army from the Zulu Wars, Boer War, the whole way right up until early Afghan, Iraq and things like that. So I don't know much about these rifles, so I'm going to get Danny to talk about them, and I'll just be asking him questions and stuff on them. So what's the first one we have here, Danny?
Well, what we've got there, John, is actually basically the first rapid rifle, really, of the British Army service after the muskets and the 1853 pattern muskets. We have the Martini Henry, the legendary Martini Henry of the Zulu Wars. This particular example is a Mark I that's been converted to Mark II. The difference between that is it just changed some parts of the breech and the extractor claw, and that example was built in 1881, but exactly the same as used the famous actions of Rorke's Drift and Isandlwana.
One thing I always find fascinating about these rifles is because I'm 5'7", so I'm an average height of a guy. Right? And it's literally coming to my mid-chest.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable, especially when you start putting the bayonet on it, and when you put the sergeant's sword bayonet on there, you're adding another 17 inches on the traditional 17 inches of the sword bayonet on top of it. And
this was obviously a rifle, and I presume the length of the rifle was with the longer the rifle, or the longer the barrel, the more accurate it was.
Yeah, again this time they were still experimenting with different barrel lengths. The carbines were stupid, but then the size of the calibre of the round was an absolute beast of a round.
Like, it's not for a long barrel. It's not actually that front heavy.
No.
You know, when you say like an SLR, you can feel it going down at the front, but this is very, I won't say smooth, but like it's easy holding on target.
Martini's designed basically the ability to load the rifle. In theory, you don't have to take it down, open up a catch like on the Snyder Enfield. You have to open up a little catch, put your catch in. It is literally rapid, bang, another one in.
And what was the round this would have fired then?
455 by 577, if I remember correctly.
So it's a fairly heavy round.
Oh, at least nearly half an inch.
Yeah. So next one then we have.
Right, we've moved on for the Boer War. We're starting now. Troubles in the Empire in India, but also the Boer War's coming along. So there we have the Long Enfield. Later, this version was upgraded in 1910 to a Charger loading Lee Enfield. We'll cover that in a little bit. But this the Long Lee. Originally, a soldier would issued 2 magazines, and he'd carry it in a little pouch on his Slade Wallace equipment, and he would change magazines. But the principle was you're still loading 1 round at a time. Same as the Martini Henry principles, 1 round at a time. And on the orders of an officer, you'd cut to magazines. So what we mean by cutting to magazines is the magazine cut off. And then
I'm just going to bring this a bit closer so people can see. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about magazine cut off. It's just a little plate that they would have put on that a soldier, a quick pull could open it up to get to the magazine underneath.
When I mentioned about the upgrading to Charger loading, in 1910, well slightly earlier than that, they started bringing the idea of changing a magazine on a rifle such as this was an absolute pain for the soldier in the field. So they came up with a device, basically a form of pressed steel, where you could load 5 rounds into it, a stripper clip, charger clip, whatever you want to call it. And this little piece here was added on so the charger could be put in and the rounds loaded, thus eliminating the requirement to carry 2 magazines and loading magazines and all that malarkey. So it was quite ingenious at the time and basically revolutionary, especially in the Boer War era, just after the Boer War era, when they started bringing in this charger mechanism. But also went back to the ammunition. It was a 303 round. At the time, Hague Convention, Geneva Convention had not really been basically signed or talked about. So they were using 303 hollow point rounds, which, if you imagine, is unbelievable. There's reports.
The famous Dum Dum rounds.
The Dum Dum round. It actually comes from in India, the Dum Dum Armoury in India, where they came up with this idea of the hollow point head. But after reports come back from the Northwest Frontier of these Dum Dum rounds and what they do, I'm not going to have to explain too much what Dum Dum does to a human. It was brought up that this ammunition was terrible, should never be used. So Dum Dum. The hollow point 303 round is actually quite a rare round to find today.
So now we have moved on to what we commonly refer to as the First World War. Most people know this is the SMLE, Lee Enfield again. This one though, Danny, has some little interesting bits and bobs in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, this one is number 1 Mark III, with it still with its magazine cut off, but this one's been factory refurbed, so it's lost its volley sights. Now those of you who don't know what volley sights are, going back to our earlier charger loading Lee Enfield, we have these. Little flip up sight at the back, and a little adjustable dial at the front. The idea to that being, rather than having direct fire, you can actually volley the round over distance. So you've got ranges there up to, I'd love to see anyone going up to 27.
Maybe today, but not back
No,
then.
no. But that's the idea of volley. But they realised trench warfare, volley sights are a waste of time. That is wasting time, effort and money. So the Mark III Star came along.
And I'm just noticing, okay, from one generation, we'll say, like, the rifle, this one is fractionally heavier than this one. So they are getting heavy. Martini Henry, as I was saying earlier on, it is lighter, easier to hold. These ones, because they are a lot more timber on them, you're getting to slightly get that front heaviness out of the rifles. And then again, we're going to talk about it, whereas, as I said, I'm 5'7". They're still very, very tall rifles when you consider putting a bayonet on the top of this one and this one. Because you would have a sword bayonet.
That one had a 17-inch sword bayonet, but that one only has a short bayonet.
Yeah.
Interesting fact about the charger loading Enfield, going back to them, the Royal Naval Division actually took those over in 1914 to France.
These rifles?
Yeah, took the old charger loading Lee Enfields.
Okay.
And after that they were held back in the UK for training whilst, well, the SMLE had basically come along and mass introduced to everyone, as we know today. You know, the SMLE is still in use in India by the police force.
It is actually, yeah.
So it's just more usable for...
I think they even found some of them in Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yeah, the tribesmen up in the hills were issued en masse by when we were or were not assisting them to fight the Russians.
Yeah.
We were giving them old issue SMLEs and number 4s. Same in the Dhofar wars. With the SES, we're dropping bundles of number 4s off to help fight in the Dhofar. But still a fantastic weapon with its adjustment sights. And again, go charger loading.
And then World War II breaks out. And we have another Lee Enfield.
Yep. The BEF went over with the good old SMLE of their father's generation, but wartime requirements of cutting down the material, we need to come up with a new weapon. Australia carries on making the SMLE, they're quite happy, but Britain, Canada, and on contract from America, to go for Savage, made the good old number 4. That is a number 4 Mark I, made by Shirley of Birmingham. So it's a good British rifle. Interesting with that one, it's actually got proof stamps on it that goes up to the 1960s. And I bought this from a company in London that provided the weapons for the film industry. So there's always a bit of me that hopes that this was in like A Bridge Too Far and The Longest Day, and you know, it was used for blank firing for that.
But that's one thing I find fascinating about not just weapons or firearms, but small little things. Like if that piece or that item could tell a story, what story would it tell?
Oh yeah, I'd obviously 1881, the Martini Henry would possibly look in Egypt,
Yeah.
it could be the Sudan and all that. I would love to know where that charger loading was.
Yeah.
I'd absolutely love to know.
And then for most people on my channel, they're very, very familiar with this, because this was the standard operating rifle of the British and Irish, actually, believe it or not, with minor changes to it. Stamping was one compared to the British, but if the Irish didn't know, ours were fully automatic, the British were only semi-automatic, but it is the SLR A1 rifle. What can I say about it? If you ever want to know the difference on how to tell the difference between a British rifle and a regular Fabrique Nationale FN, they're both 7.62. Look at the muzzle flash, right? The British have this nice slender one, whereas the Irish have like a small little stubby one. Also used in the Bush Wars. It got the nickname the right hand of the free world. This is the plastic version, or the plastic furniture version. You can also get the timber version. All Europe ones copy. This one doesn't actually.
That's unfortunately a new spec.
Yeah, it's a new spec, whereas now, just for YouTube, these are all deactivated. Don't panic. We also had what was called the Energa sight on it, which was for firing a grenade off the top of it. But yeah, using the Bush Wars. The interesting thing about this rifle is, although they weren't the same, in the Falklands conflict, both armies were issued with the same rifle. and there are recounts and there are recorded incidents of British soldiers picking up Argentinian FNs because they were fully automatic compared to their single shots. So yeah, this is the standard SLR.
Well, an interesting story. Go click back to the Falklands there, and I can include this story without telling too many names. A certain chap of the regiment who lives nearby, who's still with us today, he jumped in with B Squadron. Those of you who know about the SES in the Falklands, B Squadron jumped in, they went into the sea, they were picked up and put onto ship. He lost his kit bag, so he lost his SLR. He chose an SLR over an M16, that was his personal choice, so he lost his SLR. The only weapon he had when we went ashore was his personal sidearm. Now, you automatically think personal sidearm is going to be a Browning high power, something like that. When the call went out, the regiment were going to the Falklands, he went to the armoury, his Browning wasn't serviced, he'd basically gone back to the depot repair. So, he holding his own firearms licence, he went home, opened up his safe at home, and pulled out one of his pistols out of his shooting collection. So he went ashore, well not just went ashore, but when he was landed by helicopter in the Falklands, he was carrying a World War II P-38.
Oh God.
That was the only thing that's kept inside his windproof smock. So one day when I do an SAS display in the Falklands, I will get a World War II P-38 and put it there and wait for somebody to say that's wrong.
Yeah.
But he later in the conflict picked up one of the airborne versions of the Argentinian SLR with a folding stock and that. So that's what he carried for the rest of the war, and that's currently on display in the Sergeant's Mess on the wall. Interesting one though, when you look at the really early SLRs, we mentioned about charger loading, going all the way back to the long leads which were converted to charger loading spec. The first FN FALs were built with a charger port in them.
I didn't know that. No.
So you could actually charge them with a 5-round stripper clip. British obviously, like magazines, because you change magazines, can maintain fire.
Yeah.
But the Australians actually had a speed loader where you could actually fill your charges in. So all those times in the range where you've got your bandolier, we've got to use bandoliers this time, so we've got to take the rounds off the stripper clip, load them into a mag. The whole reason for the purpose of that is the original FN FALs actually had a charger bridge for loading them.
I'm sorry, I should have mentioned as well, we've changed calibre from these, which was a 303. This is now 7.62. British Army, not just the British Army, American armies, after the Cold War, shall we say, and different conflicts in the Cold War, they realised, okay, the 7.62 round is too strong. We've had instances of bursting through walls and, without being too frank about it, injuring and killing people that shouldn't have been dealt with. So they went to 5.56 round. Now, the Irish Defence Forces used the Steyr AUG, which is the same principle as this. It's called a bullpup. And when I say bullpup, what I mean is all the working parts are actually behind the trigger. So when you hear the term bullpup, that's what it means. All of the working parts are behind the trigger. So you came up with this, the British Army came up with this, the SA-80. I have used the real version of this. I have fired it at ranges and stuff like that. It leaves a bit to be desired, if you ask me, compared to our Steyrs. But they have gone through multiple changes, and I believe they're happy enough with the one that they got now.
Well, the new version, the A3, and I think they're going to even the A4 nowadays, with the tan coverings and different specs, and it's all based. That came out of Afghan and Iraq, because again, this is the first same weapon. Your TA units and your reserve units went to the first Gulf War in 1991 with the good old humble SLR. The last unit to get rid of the SLR in British service was the RAF in 1993. Okay. My old corporal, he shot the SLR on his trade training, but the SA-80, it was the Afghan-Iraq wars that we started realising, obviously, they'd gone to A2 spec. This is an A1, it's got the early stubby cocking handle. The A2 has the teardrop cocking handle, but also the strengthened springs and some other jiggery pokery. Basically, our good old Enfield factory gave the SA-80 to Heckler and Koch and said, make this great. And they did. The A2 is a fantastic weapon, if it's maintained correctly and serviced correctly. Obviously the A3, the newer version, has got rid of the traditional big old plastic front, and we've got your RIS rails, your Daniels defences. You're looking earlier on in Afghan, you see guys zip tying and taping on torches and bodging American pistol grips on, so you can do your fancy 2-grip action. Again, it's a platform that can be modified over time. The SUSAT, sighting unit small arms Trilux, goes back to the days of when the SLR was fitted with a Trilux. It's a 4-power, if I remember, 4-power magnification scope. these have been upgraded now. We've got things like the ACOGs and the hologram sights and all different ones. And
But just another quick little thing there I want to show you. Obviously the conflicts have changed. We've gone to more vehicle mounted air assault type things. You need a shorter rifle. Now, the actual, believe it or not, the barrel on this actually goes just from about there all the way to here. So if you put this up against a, shall we say, barrel is pretty much the same length. If I go from the breech of that Mark IV all the way out to the tip of that, it is the same length. But it is substantially shorter. So that's one plus of a bullpup, is you're taking all that front wastage pretty much and you're cutting it down to a smaller package. We also we've got optical sights. The SLRs were fitted with them late in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s.
We also see red dots. Yeah, the American red dot was occasionally fitted on here.
Yeah, after the Falklands, they started putting sights on them. Every modern military now today has a sight. Unfortunately, we can see that in Ukraine, where they were screaming out for sights to be put on rifles because they were there. Now, this does have an emergency sight on the top if anything does happen to your sight. But yeah, so it's just we said we'd just do a little interesting video on firearms that the British Army use. So you literally have everything from Zulu Wars all the way up to the war in Afghanistan. So I hope you like what we provide here at Era Military Collectibles. Please like, please subscribe, and please tune in for the next video. And as always, if you want to get in contact with the channel, there will be an email at the top of the video description. And I'd like to thank Danny for the last few videos that we've done for using his collection. So thank you very much, and go check him out, Herefordshire Regimental Museums.